Hey everyone, sorry that the Sabbath school didn't work today. If you tried to log on, you'll have noticed that it said waiting for the host to open the room. We had some technical difficulties today, so this is it. This is going to go up on our socials and on YouTube, and we might even email it to you all. So we hope that this can bless you in some way. We're going to talk about mean Christians. We have a stereotype that often gets lumped on Christians as a whole, that they're mean, hypocritical, judgmental, and it's something that a lot of Christians really don't like being called, because if you talk to most individual Christians, they're not like that. But as a whole, you get these one or two bad eggs that do come across as really mean or judgmental or hypocritical. And then all of a sudden, all Christians are like that to people who aren't. And so it's really important how we act so that we don't feed into that stereotype. So there's a couple of verses that really challenge me. The book of Romans talks about this a lot. In chapter 12, verse 10, it says to be devoted to one another in brotherly love. In 12:16, it says, never be wise in your own sight. And in 13:10, it says, love does no harm to its neighbors. And that's challenging, because if love does no harm and we're meant to show brotherly love, and we're not meant to be wise and try to be the smartest person or whatever, it makes it really hard, because there's always that one person, right, that you don't want to love. But it tells us that love does no harm to its neighbors. And that's not with an asterisk saying to this person or to this person. It's to all neighbors. We've got to be loving. So we're gonna have a few questions that we're gonna chat about. If you have any thoughts about this, please get in touch. We'd love to hear your thoughts about these questions. But our first one is, why do you think that Christians have the stereotype of being mean, judgmental, and hypocritical? Let's start with Chelsea.
So um I think a lot of that's got to do with sin. Like coming back to like the beginnings of when things started to go wrong, was when sin occurred. And so I think it's kind of developed from that. A bit of jealousy, guilt and shame has got a lot to do with it too. And I think as Christians, we don't want to accept that. We kind of want to think, oh, like I'm good with God. Like my relationship with God is better than that person's, or and like we kind of put labels on other people. And so I think, don't quote me on this. This is just my thoughts, but I think that's kind of where it's come from, and that's why some Christians are come across as meaner than others.
That's awesome. Thanks, Chelsea. Boo Boo, Brandon.
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Chelsea said, and I feel as though with the experiences that I've had, it almost gets taken into like a competitional, I don't know whether that's a word, but I'm going to check it out anyway, standpoint, where you've got like the really like hardcore Christians who like buy the book and they do everything right. And well, according to them, because obviously your own journey with Christ is your own journey, but I feel as though Bible bashing can come into it a lot, and mean Christians can come into a lot when, especially when it's two Christians coming together but different takes on very controversial topics. I feel that's where the mean Christian, for me personally, has sort of, or where I've had my experience with that, is people very set in their ways and set in their ideas, and with the refusal to accept anyone else's ideas. And I feel like that's a big thing with mean Christians, is refusal to take on other people's perspectives and ideas. And that personally, that's where I've had the most sort of experience with it is, yeah, I think that's sort of sums up my answer to that question.
When you get the two different opinions in the same room on a controversial topic, things can get heated. Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
What do you think, Izzy?
I think very similarly with Brandon. about the Bible bashing and all that. And I also think it potentially comes down to people taking the Bible out of context, if that makes sense. So like the Bible says this, and like we believe this and they believe that, but the way that they go about presenting that to other people is not the right way. And I also feel like when they take the Bible out of context and stuff, they're not very loving and like God-like to other people. Like that's just from my experience. And like sometimes if people do that, then they turn other people away from God, and they stop other people from wanting to go to church anymore. And then there becomes this stigma because they've had this one interaction with this person, that all Christians are like that and are very full on. Yeah.
That's a good point, and I think it shows how important our actions are, because our interactions with a person could be the difference between their view on Christianity. Yeah, that's awesome, Izzy. Thank you, Haley.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said so far. Another thing that I would probably add is that as Christians, we hold ourselves to a higher standard, I suppose, because we're given like this moral compass, I suppose, by the Bible and Jesus. And we also, I guess, kind of push that moral compass onto other people and expect that of them. And when people aren't living up to that, maybe we'll think differently of them. And maybe that comes across in how we treat them or our facial expressions or anything like that. And I guess that could come across as mean if they're talking about drinking or something like that, and we kind of screw our face up, or I don't know, something's going on in the world and we don't agree with them, like I don't know, different social issues that are going on at the moment. If we had different perspectives on that, that can cause some tension. So I guess from that tension, it can come across that we're being mean or judgmental or hypocritical. Yeah,
absolutely. I really like the point of the Bible being taken out of context, because you look through right back through history. We'll get there, and you look at the Crusades, and the church used the Bible as their reasoning and whatever else to go into a land and go on to war, using the Bible as well. The Bible tells us we need to do this. So right throughout history, we've taken it out of context. So have we ever experienced this before personally? I think for me, I know it's not a very big one, but it's always sticks in my mind. I can remember walking into church one day, and I'd been at church the night before for whatever reason. I had left my thongs outside on the grass. I can remember before church started, I went out, grabbed them so I wouldn't forget them. And I walked into the church, and this little old lady said, "Oh, you better not be wearing thongs to church." And I just remember thinking, I saying to her at the time, "No, of course not." And then, as I walked away from the interaction, it really annoyed me, because I was like, "Are you serious? You have a young person walking into church. Let's just be grateful that they're coming to church instead of, are you wearing thong? Like, who cares? Like, at the end of the day, what you're wearing, just be grateful and welcome them into church." And that one will always stick in my mind. So have you ever experienced a time where, and maybe it's had good intentions, but something has come across, or you've experienced a Christian being mean or judgmental, hypocritical?
Well, I'll start again, but I think for me, like, it's never happened. I've been very lucky, I think. Growing up, my home church back in Perth was very accepting of people. And I've just been really blessed. But obviously I've heard stories where, in particular, girls like my age have, or even younger, have like worn dresses to church, to a more conservative church, and they've been told like that's not okay. And so I guess from a female's perspective, like sometimes the church can be very appearance orientated, and you have to look a certain way to go to church, when really that's not what the church is about. It's about looking at the heart, and your intentions are there for Jesus and for being in community and learning about God more. So again, that's never happened to me, but I know maybe Brandon, has it happened to you?
Well, I can't say I've worn a dress to church, but um, in I have had a similar experience to what Jaden mentioned about like wearing thongs and like wearing my Birks and that sort of stuff. But what sort of comes to mind every time that sort of happens is like Jesus said, "Come as you are," and
Yeah.
so I do, sort of thing. But I think the main experience, and I'll take it back to what how I answered the first question, was because I've come from a Pentecostal home to studying up at college in a Seventh-day Adventist institution, which I had really no idea about anything prior to coming up there. But yeah, it's been the sort of disagreements of opinions that's sort of been the biggest thing for me with like my interactions with like a mean Christian, to put in quotation marks. Yeah, COVID's got me with PTSD already. So yeah, I think that's just the biggest thing with me is just difference in opinions with like even topics that aren't so controversial. I'm struggling to think of exactly what the anyway. But I think that's been the biggest thing for me is just the difference in opinions and I've had it with a few people, like, because I try to speak my mind and try not to hide like what I'm thinking, sort of thing, because you're not really going to accomplish anything when you're doing that. Obviously, there's a time and a place to speak your mind, and you've got to pick that time and place. But I feel like, yeah, just having someone come from a different side of an idea, a different church, a different whatever, a different religion altogether. You've got to be, I feel as a Christian, you've got to be understanding and able to take on board what that person is bringing to the table. And I feel as though that's where my sort of hiccups have been with mean Christians, is just the lack of understanding and lack of wanting to understand. Like, even if you don't have to agree with what I'm saying, you don't have to agree with what the other person is saying, but it's that mutual respect shown that I believe a true Christian should show, is that understanding. And because what did Jesus do for starters? Like, he hung out with all like the rascals, I guess you could say, and back in Bible days. But yeah, Iz, you want to take over?
So I don't really have I haven't really come in contact with mean Christians, but my parents have. And I remember hearing this story when I was younger of my mum. She had her 21st birthday party. And so at her birthday she had like obviously like a cake and like sweets and stuff. And this Christian lady who was very conservative and like by the book sort of thing, she came over and she sort of, she didn't chuck a hissy fit, but she made comments about all these sweets and stuff at my mum's party. And so she took them away and she had made like more healthier snacks and replaced them with that. Because of like the Christian health message and stuff. But yeah, so that's that.
Seems bizarre to me, I guess. For me, I have two kind of things that stick out for me. One is that when I've gone to different churches or visited other churches, I'm fairly comfortable with doing that, but sometimes they can be quite cliquey and in groups. And I guess as Christians and as Seventh-day Adventists, we kind of like stick to our denomination with thoughts and everything, and we have friends in those groups. So when someone new comes, you have a choice to either embrace them and welcome them in, or you can keep to your own little group. And I guess sometimes, I don't know, for some reason we don't want to break those groups, or we have a hard time letting people in. I don't know what it is, but I feel like we can be cliquey, which can come across quite mean and exclusive. And then another thing, which could be a bit controversial, I guess, is like when I've gone to college and I've had some like theology classes and things like that. I don't feel like I have the best Bible knowledge. Like, I know a bit of this and that. But if I don't feel like I know what the lecturer is talking about and I've said I don't know, and they're like, what, you don't know? And they kind of like treat you like you're meant to know all this stuff. That makes me feel quite self-conscious and like down on myself when people say, oh, you don't know that, and take that away from the lecturing kind of perspective and into church with other leaders and friends or stuff that talk about something like, oh, you don't know that story, really? Or like, I don't know, even if it's not about story or concept, like, the feeling of I don't know and wow, you should know that, like that's hurtful. And I guess sometimes we could do that to non-Christians as well.
Yeah. Well, when I was in like when I used to go to my old church and I went to Sabbath school and stuff, I actually stopped going to Sabbath school because of that reason. I felt like I didn't know enough to, I don't know, contribute to discussions and stuff, because I always felt like they were degrading me because I didn't have like a big knowledge of Christianity and like what the Bible says and stuff. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Thanks, guys. I think the thing that's sticking out to me is that you can feel, I guess, mean Christians can come from anywhere, whether they're conservative or liberal or in the country or in the city. It really is how you view other people. And I guess the next question is a bit more personal, and it's, where do you struggle to be a loving Christian? Are there areas that you struggle with? Because I know for me that I often can, I have to pull myself out of that judgmental thought. And sometimes it just happens. And you know, as humans, we're always going to have that, that thought of, oh, you know, they're wearing that or they're doing that, but you know, that's the first thought. We're just humans, we judge. But you can pull yourself out of that, and not show that, and not view, you know, say that opinion, because at the end of the day it might be that first thought, but it's not your actual thoughts. And so for me, I guess just learning to not judge in that split instance, and take a step back, for me, is what I struggle with in being a loving Christian. What about you guys?
I think I'm a bit the same as you. Like, based on sometimes people's appearance, I can be quite judgmental by the way they look. So, for example, if they've come straight off the street, maybe they're homeless or something, I'll be like, oh, like I want to stay away from those people, when in fact they're the people that we should be accepting like the most, and like really surrounding them. But yeah, like it's all a matter of heart in the end, I think. Like for me, I'm aware that I can be quite appearance judgmental. Yeah, you guys understand what I'm saying. And so I'm trying to work on that, and try and pull myself up on that, and instead of being judgmental, extending a helping hand to those people who I am judging.
Yeah.
I feel with me, it's a constant thing. Like, you've always got to be aware of yourself and critical of yourself, and reflecting on like what you hold like to be of value to you. So your values and your beliefs and all that sort of stuff. So I feel with me is the forgiveness side of things. Like, I struggle, and I definitely have to pull myself up on it a lot, is it's like letting go, not even like necessarily personal things. Like I'm a super protective person. So if someone's done wrong by like one of my friends, one of my family members, I'll be automatically, if I haven't even met them, I'll be judging them and be like, oh, you're a terrible person, sort of thing. But it's a bit savage, but anyway. But yeah, I feel as though for me personally, I'm constantly on myself about, okay, I don't actually know them, or what have I learned from this? What does Jesus preach? And it's forgiveness. And I honestly, like, once I get over that hump of like, just get to the top of it and go, all right, done. I've seen everything I need to see. I come to the conclusion of what I need to, which is forgiveness, because that's what I believe in and that's what I hold true to myself, I have just a wave of like a weight lifted off my shoulders, and yeah, then problem solved, I guess. But that's probably the biggest thing for me, is just that forgiveness and getting over myself a bit and not taking everything so personal. And yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Brandon.
For me, it's probably the being judgmental. I've reflected on that quite a bit recently because I've had to fill out my ASA application form for jobs next year. And there's a few questions that ask you about like a Christian philosophy sort of thing, and like your attitudes and beliefs towards certain things. And I think for me, I need to always remember that it's not my place to judge other people, because God and Jesus are going to be the ones who will be judging us at the end. So therefore, it's not our place to judge other people. And I also always have to remember that Jesus spent time with sinners and with people who were poor and lonely and homeless and stuff. And so I think I always need to try and act in a Christ-like, God-likely way that demonstrates love, because, yeah, I think that's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. Hayley?
Oh, okay. I've been kind of dreading this because this is something that I like really struggle with, and it's been like a very apparent thing recently. But I'm jumping on Brandon's back with the whole forgiveness train, because there's some people I don't want to forgive, and I'm just being very honest. Like, they've hurt me, or they've hurt my friend, or something along those lines, and I've got a very strong sense of justice, I suppose. Like, you cross them, you're crossing me, and it gets to the point where in me it wells up like, I hate you. Like, it gets to a point of like really strong dislike or disdain for someone, where I can think some pretty vile things like, I don't want you around anymore, or like, and like that's taking it to the extreme. But there's some people in my mind who are awful people, or have done awful things, and I don't want, and I like, in my mind it's like, oh, you can forgive them, and I'm like, no, they don't deserve my forgiveness, or I don't want to. Like, in the back of my mind it's like, come on, you can choose it, and I'm like, I don't want to. Like, I don't want them in my life, and I don't want them in my friend, or I don't know. So that's something that I'm currently still struggling with, because I'm just very stubborn, I suppose. But yeah, there's some people who cross you and it's hard. So if you're experiencing that same thing, I'm with you too. Do I think that it's a right way to feel? Or not exactly, but like, yeah, sometimes it can really boil up in you, especially if they've done something really nasty or they've hurt you in the past. So I think,
yeah, for sure,
to an extent it's okay to feel those things, because we're human and that's what happens, but we have to learn how to deal with that, and I'm not there yet.
Hey, I want to thank everyone for being really open and honest. I want to finish with two things. There's two quotes that I love, and the first one, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it's by a guy called Saint Francis of Assisi or something like that. And he says, preach the gospel and, if necessary, use words. And it's sort of along the lines of one of the mottos that I try and live by is, I might be the only Bible that anyone ever reads. And when you put it into that perspective, all of a sudden everything changes, because your life's not just about you, it's about God and how you are reflecting God to others around the world. And so I guess this week is, you think about your interactions with others. We just want to encourage you that we're not all perfect. We're all struggling with different areas of it, but just try and remember in your actions and your everyday thoughts and words to others, how is this reflecting Jesus to the person you're interacting with? How is this reflecting Jesus to the world and the people around me? Because your actions and your words matter, and people are watching and listening more than you think. So I really hope that you have an amazing week. Please reach out to us if you have need for anything. We're here to support you. We hope that you've enjoyed our little discussion. We're just going to finish with a prayer. Hey, God, thanks that we're able to have this discussion. I pray that it's blessed those who've watched it. Thank you for the opportunity we have to be so open and honest about things that we're struggling with in our lives. And I just pray that we all, you help us with the areas that we're struggling in, and you help us to move forward, and you help us to become more like you each and every day. Thank you for the cross, Lord. Thank you for dying on it, and thank you for all that you do each and every day. We pray all this in your precious name. Amen.
Amen.